Hey, welcome to episode 13. Ooh, spooky. The unlucky number. At least in America. Is it just America? Is it, wait, I feel like it might just be like a Western thing. I know in some Asian countries, in Japan, like 4 is sometimes an unlucky number, because uh, one way of saying 4 is she, so it sounds like shin, which is death, and then which so they have an alternate pronunciation, which is yon for 4. And then in China, I think like 3 is unlucky. Um, yeah, anyway, episode 13 of Cellarcast. The Cellarcast. I've got some generally kind of fun, happy stories. We got a little bit of stuff that I was thinking about. That's not. I try to break these. I try to pace them out so it's not just an onslaught of bad vibes, but. So I wanted to there were some stories that I thought were pretty interesting that I wanted to punch through at the beginning that were not super positive. But first, before that, we're going to do a comment review from last episode. I wanted to say thank you everyone for the very nice feedback on the Sega video that I put out. I've definitely been trying to I've been so tired. I've been so tired recently, and I've been trying to just kind of pace myself out a little better, which is why that, it came out a little late, and but I think it paid off. I try to do a video a week, but when you just kind of grind at something for a while, you kind of burnout kind of sneaks up on you. Did I say all this stuff last week? I feel like I talked about it last week, but yeah. I'm feeling good though. That video got a really nice reception, so thank you everyone who watched that or enjoyed it. Anyway, this first comment comes to us from Lozy. Once again. Interestingly enough, I talked about a bit on the last episode about box art changing for different markets. Yeah, it was the Mega Man, the infamous Mega Man 1 North American box art, and how thankfully we really don't get stuff like that nowadays. And he actually brought up an example that I was not aware of or wasn't on my mind. So he says it keeps happening, but not in such an exaggerated way, which is true. I think if a game came out with box art that bad, it would be. I would be very surprised. So the most recent example I can think of is Scarlet Nexus, which tries to look not anime compared to its Japanese cover. Yeah, so I actually went and looked this up. Scarlet Nexus was a game that I heard about. I heard some people talking about it positively. It seemed pretty fun. It's Platinum Games title, I believe. Right? Bandai... No, just a Bandai game. Okay. I for some reason I thought it was a Platinum game. And yeah, I didn't realize it, but so the game does have a very, in-game, it has a very obviously anime-inspired look with the character designs and such, and the stylings, and in fact it has a tie-in anime that is maybe still airing? I don't know at this point. And the Japanese cover basically tells you that. So if I can't find the Japanese cover right here. Japanese box art. So the Japanese cover art is yep, this is an anime style thing. It's a little ensemble piece, and it's a bunch of anime characters. the international box art, very different. Like, it still has the same basic aesthetic of characters with this kind of like tech clothing and these like triangle grid shapes and all that. But the faces are basically obscured, and it almost reminds me of like the cover of like Prototype. Very weird. Like, it doesn't look like the art style at all, and I don't know why they would do that. I don't know if there was any like statement or anything like that. But I couldn't find anything exactly. I didn't dig super hard, but I couldn't find any exact reasoning for why they would alter it so dramatically to almost like if I bought a game with that cover and then I saw the game, I would be a little taken aback. I would be, it'd be a little, it's like, oh, this is an anime game? All right. Kind of strange. It does feel like the 2000s or something, where companies had to obscure the fact that they were anime inspired. Right? You know, publishers had to obscure the fact that their games were anime inspired, and basically sneak up on you, spring an anime trap on you when you actually put the disc in. Yeah, I don't know why. And then he also Losey also mentions the Kirby covers, in which infamously the American box arts for Kirby games always add little angry eyebrows to his face, whereas usually he's just a little wide-eyed little pink guy. He's tough, he's angry, to appeal more to children, I guess. Regarding games as something degrading, which was subject last time on the podcast as well, I had a bad look at me for playing Pokemon, the looks of "you're too old for that." And what happened next? 10 years later, people of all ages are looking for Pokemon in the streets. Yeah, it's the circle of life. It is something that's a little frustrating, I'm sure, and it is funny though, right? Like, when you kind of know the subculture and thing, it's still like fairly niche, and you're not super like accepted for it, or you get kind of like mocked for it. On one hand, it's like, I wish this was more of an accepted thing, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Where once the monkey's paw curls, where you are no longer looked down on for being into this thing. However, it's now mainstream. Ugh. Normies. And you know, that's not all bad. It's not necessarily bad, but you do kind of lose something in that exchange. There's this really interesting concept. I'd recommend anyone to look this up and Google it. It's called the Endless September. So it comes from like September of 1994. Let me find the exact year. Was it 92? Endless September. So Endless September refers to September 1993, which was when America Online started offering much more widespread access to the internet, or actually Usenet. And basically meant that the existing Usenet user base was flooded by... basically, the Endless September refers to a situation where there are more new members of a community than existing ones. The new users, or the new members, outnumber the old ones. And some people say that's like bad. I mean, even when I look it up here, the eternal September mindset needs to end. and how it's, you know, it's about elitism and gatekeeping and all that stuff. But I think there's merit to wanting to protect good parts of your community and not wanting it to, you wanting to curate your community in like a real positive way. I remember when I got really into HoloLive, because I am that kind of guy. I got into it around like March 2020, and fuck, have I almost been into it for like 2 years? That's so crazy to think about. Man, time flies. Right, and that was quite a bit before the English. They opened the English HoloLive English branch of the company, and that was when like there was a huge influx of new people into the community. And before that, it was mostly people who, you know, were willing to go and watch like translated clips and watch live streams that were not in English and stuff like that. And there was some bit of a fear, bit of like a caution with the existing like English speaking overseas fan base that is the influx of like Western viewers going to do any kind of weird stuff to the community, right? Because you think about like just a bunch of like weird people who are obsessed with drama on like, you know, Twitter people, because it's a very like, it's a community that's very based around like just kind of like appreciating the content and being like genuinely positive, and anyone starting drama or anything is very looked down upon. Like stirring the pot, it's like, please just let this be nice. And then, you know, thankfully that really didn't happen. But it was a thing that I saw and I have seen before. Anyway, getting on to the actual question, because I just can't stop running my mouth. Do you think it is good that Nintendo limits its developers with all of its lack of graphics power and making everything portable? I'm sad that if Bayonetta 3 comes out, it will look like a game from 2 previous generations. The waifu needs to shine in 4K ray tracing and all that, but it looks like an impossible dream if it is in the clutches of Nintendo. So now there will be an open world Pokemon that looks like those cross-gen games between PS2 to PS3. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's just to make my point. So, is Nintendo limiting its developers? Nintendo has always kind of been, since the N64, Nintendo has been behind in terms of power. And, I mean, Nintendo has a long history with this. They haven't had... Nintendo has not had a shot at making a console with power that is up to par with PlayStation and Xbox since the Wii U. And the Wii U was a big freaking disaster for many reasons. But like, really, okay, think about it. So Nintendo obviously killed it with the NES, killed it with the Super Nintendo. And then they were going to make their next system was supposed to be use discs. It was supposed to use discs instead of cartridges. Obviously, the N64 ended up using cartridges. Why did that happen? Well, they had a deal with a company called Philips. The deal fell through. Philips made the Philips CDI, and that's how we got the Zelda games, because the Zelda Wand of Gamelon and the Mario Hotel Mario and all that. Because it was part of their like deal that they could use like the IPs to make like 3 or 4 games or something like that for the system. That's how we got those games, and then eventually, obviously, PlayStation came in, and Sony was like, hey, we're trying to make a console, and you guys had this thing that you wanted to do that didn't work out. You want to come get in our car?" And Phillips was like, "Yeah." And then Nintendo inadvertently created their biggest competitor in the PlayStation. But anyway, the deal fell through. Nintendo was just kind of forced to go with cartridges, and that hurt their third-party developer relations a lot. They burned a lot of bridges because of that. Not necessarily because of anything like uncool that they did, but literally just because it's like, well, if you're a developer and you're like, well, I can make it for the N64, where I can make my game for the N64 that uses cartridges, and I'm going to have to severely limit the scope of my game. Or I can go with the PlayStation that already has a large install base, that has a much wider age range that enjoys it, and that is way more powerful because it lets me use discs, so I can make much bigger games. You have the freedom to make a game like, Final Fantasy VII that uses 3 discs. Like, what are you going to do? Use 3 cartridges? That's ridiculous. So the N64 always kind of sold. It's looked back upon fondly, but it's often forgotten that sales-wise, it didn't do amazingly. Of course, it did have some hot games. It had that Mario 64. It had Smash. It wasn't like a total disaster. Right? It wasn't a big flop, but it was much weaker than the competition. And then the GameCube, I'm not exactly sure how well the GameCube kind of measured up in terms of power. I think it was probably roughly on par with the PS2. But it didn't sell that well, I think in large part because of the lack of third-party support. There was just because now you also had the Xbox, so it was getting a little crowded. You had the Xbox, and you had the Dreamcast, and then you had the PS2, and it was getting a little crowded. And in terms of third-party games, PS2 was looking pretty nice, and it doubled as a DVD player. Sweet. And the Xbox, of course, had Halo. So Nintendo, they're doing, and they're like, okay, let's go crazy. They do the Wii. They didn't have enough money to make an HD console. Whatever. We're going to do motion controls. It's going to be in every nursing home in the world, in every continent. Huge success. Tons of money. Sweet. What do we do next? Let's do the Wii U. Oh no, we marketed it horribly. So despite the fact that the Wii U was a much more powerful console in terms of being HD and just step up technologically, definitely mishandled in a lot of ways. Definitely. There's probably been essays from people in like. I try not to burp in these. What the hell? I haven't eaten. I literally ate like 6 hours ago. What the fuck? Yeah, there's probably people in like marketing school who have done essays about how the Wii U flopped. So then they were like, okay, let's chill out. Let's do the Switch. Let's do another weirdo thing. Make it somewhat competitive. Not really. They didn't have the money from the Wii U to make a PS4. Nintendo's always kind of offbeat in their release cycle, but that level of console. So, I'd be very curious to see what they do after the Switch, which is going to be for a while. The Switch is going to be out for a while. Nintendo has just because they're gonna have the money, and hopefully they have the good decision making and they learn their lessons to actually make a very powerful console with proper third-party support, with, you know, just ride the wave that they've created with the Switch. I can't say whether or not it's a good or bad thing. I'm also, you have to understand that I'm not the best person to ask about console gaming, because I am not a console gamer. I don't own a Switch. I'm not sure. How good is the Switch's third-party support? It seems... What games come out on the Switch? Switch third-party games. Like, what Dragon Ball FighterZ is on the Switch? I didn't even know that. Witcher 3, a lot of, like, ports. A lot of, well, I mean, of course, they would be ports, but a lot of ports of older games. Let's see, there's a new Monster Hunter. I got the Dragon Quest. A lot of, like, they don't have a lot of, like, big budget AAA third party games. So they still haven't really won back that. And again, it's because Nintendo has a lot of opportunity to, if they just had a console that was more powerful, I think that they would be able to be a serious competitor with their competitors, with Xbox and PlayStation, especially Xbox, which has been suffering in the last few years. When you put your game on a Nintendo console, especially the Switch, you have to, there's a couple, like, I guess, concessions you're making. You have to be making some understandings. One of those is that you are not going to the biggest market in terms of, like, you do have to develop for the lowest common denominator. So you need to, what the fuck am I trying to say? When I say the market, I'm trying to use words without putting them together in my head the right way. What I'm trying to say is, Nintendo has an inbuilt audience that is more casual, more family oriented, and if you're putting your game on there, you know that you do have the audience for it. There is an install base, right? But you might not be able to see the same returns as you would if you put it on, for instance, PS5 or Steam. If you did like a PS5 and Steam version, right? Yeah, the comment at the end, there's an open world Pokemon game that's gonna look like, one of those cross-gen PS2, PS3 games. That's a Game Freak issue. That's a totally different can of worms. Personally, I think that Game Freak has suffered from basically being bullwhipped into putting out a Pokemon game on a really tight schedule, and not having good organization. They have not adapted to making console games very well, which has led to some cheapness in stuff like Sword and Shield. it's not necessarily the Switch isn't like, it's not like a potato, right? It can. I think they made a mistake with not. Fuck. Oh man, I didn't even think about this. I was gonna say, I think that I was about to say they made a mistake by not putting out a more powerful version and just doing the Switch OLED, which was a little lame. But now that I think about it, there is like a global semiconductor shortage from the pandemic. So there might legitimately be like an issue with making an upgraded version, like literally in terms of like manufacturing it. Like they might just have not been able to literally get it made. You have to be a little patient in this pandemo with that kind of thing. There's a lot of factors going on. I can't say exactly whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just kind of the fact of the matter. And if you're making a game, if you're a publisher, you just have to make the decision for yourself of what audiences you are going to appeal to. Like maybe you look at the Switch and you're like, it's not worth putting our game on, not because it doesn't have enough power to run it or anything like that, but because it's just not the right market. Or maybe we can do it later, but for now we're going to prioritize a release on some different platforms. I hope that answered your question. I got way off topic. Anyway, I want to talk about, we got to go into the Blizzard block. That's what I'm calling it. This one comes from Communications Workers of America. A press release. Employees of Activision Blizzard file unfair labor practice charge against the gaming company. I'm just going to speed through this one because, yep, they did it again. So, the Communications Workers of America has formally filed, they formally filed the unfair labor practice charges against the company for worker intimidation and union busting. So basically, they launched, so the workers at Blizzard launched a better ABK, which is they call it a strategic organizing effort to unite developers behind a shared set of concerns, ABK being Activision Blizzard King. So instead of responding to these demands, Activision Blizzard management is using coercive tactics to prevent its employees from exercising their rights to stand together and demand a more equitable, sustainable, and diverse workplace. Yeah, so Tom Smith, who's an organizer at CWA, said management could have responded with humility and a willingness to take necessary steps to address the horrid conditions some ABK workers have faced. Instead, Activision Blizzard's response to righteous worker activity was surveillance, intimidation, and hiring notorious union busters. So I don't know if this is in response to anything in particular that they've done recently, besides, of course, hiring the law firm that Ian Hazzikostas used to work at, which is also famous for being a union buster for Amazon and all that stuff. But yes, they continue to be lame. That was the Blizzard block. I just wanted to talk about it because those people suck. Not the workers, the management. On to something much more fun. There's a Doom mod coming out. I had to talk about this. I love this. There's a Doom mod coming out September 24th, so in just a couple days. It's called Thatcher's Techbase. So here's the premise of Thatcher's Techbase. So Margaret Thatcher has risen from her tomb. And she's risen from hell, and she's come back to to wreak terror on the world, and it's your job to rip and tear through the 10th layer of hell, Britain, and put her back in the ground. Let me check the actual, like, there's some fun. You go to Thatcher's-techbase.github.io. I'll link it down below. They've got under the media, they've got some mock-up. It's basically like a parody mock-up box art. Why is there like a version? It's a parody of the Doom 2 cover with the Doom guy firing off against the cyber demon, but instead it's Margaret Thatcher as the cyber demon. It's pretty good. And then the back of the box reads, "Margaret Thatcher is back, and this time the lady's not for returning." Yeah, so it is. It doesn't say exactly how long it is, but it says that it's for a limit removing Doom source port, so it's going to be fairly, it's going to be flexing the Doom engine. It's got a bunch of, just from the various screenshots, it's got a bunch of unique assets and textures. Looks like different new enemies, if I'm looking at that correctly. They might just be reskins. Can't tell. But there are new weapons, that is confirmed. What are they? Yeah, what are they called? The brass knuckles, the British Gauss gun, a Trident launcher, and even the infamous BFG 1990. I don't know the significance of 1990. I looked it up in relationship to Margaret Thatcher. Maybe if I just hang out, Margaret Thatcher 1990? Oh, vote of no confidence. Oh, that's hilarious. That's actually hilarious. Wait, so she failed to she resigned. That's hilarious. Okay, that's dope. I love that. Yeah, so there's this great mock-up box cover art. There's one where it's for like classic Windows. There's one where it's for Mac OS. There's one where it's for Nintendo 3DS. I don't know what that is. Well, I guess the homebrew launcher. I guess you can play Doom on. I mean, of course you can play Doom on homebrew. What are these like? Okay, they have some custom audio. There's like a demonic edit of Margaret Thatcher's face. Yeah, it looks really fun. It comes out on the in a couple days on the 24th. I love mods for games that are better than the original. That's always great. Oh yeah, you can get the original soundtrack as well. That's cool. It is by, let's see, by a couple people, mainly this guy Jim Purvis. He's the main. He made the original textures, level design, scripting, planning, writing, and all that. Yeah, so that's all really cool. It's great to find like mods that are better than the original. Oh, dude. Okay, if you're listening, which I guess you have to be, anyone, go play frickin', there's a Doom mod. It's called, Ashes 2097? 2063. Just, so good. So good. It's a post-apocalyptic mod for Doom. There's only one episode out since last few years. Yeah, 2018. It is so good. Some of the most like intense. There is a. Looks like there's a bit of a. Yeah, there's a fan-made DLC basically called Dead Man Walking. Other than that, there hasn't been a follow-up or a second episode. But yeah, Ashes 2063 is just an awesome, some of the most tense shootouts I have ever had in a first-person shooter. Tons of it's basically a completely different game. It's almost like an FPS set in Fallout, which is almost definitely a huge inspiration for it. If you're curious at all about that, totally check out Ashes 2063. It is there's tons of basically totally different, totally new weapons. There's like RPG style town areas. There's like vehicles. There's a bunch of new like enemies. Some just amazing level design that's just like super intricate and incredibly themed. Go check it out. This one's a bit of a downer. See, we're pacing it. You gotta go up and then you gotta go down. Former Bungie composer Marty O'Donnell found in contempt of court over use of Destiny assets. So when I first read this, article, it comes from gosh darn it. Comes from Eurogamer by Wesley Yin Poole. Why do I got so much burps in me? When I first read this, I just thought it was kind of sad. And then digging into it a little more, it was like, oh, now it's sad, but for a different reason. So you hear that headline, you're like, what? What kind of lawsuit did they have between them? So basically what happened was Marty O'Donnell was fired. He did not leave. He was fired in 2014 from Bungie. Obviously, Marty O'Donnell, he was the composer of all the Halo music. That's how you know him. He was fired 2014. And, let's see. When he was fired, he was ordered to return all material related to basically all the work he'd done for Destiny. So, the musical score for Destiny was called Music of the Spheres. And let's see. So he had to return anything returned. So, he composed the soundtracks for Destiny. It was called Music of the Spheres. When he was fired, he was ordered to return all material related to Music of the Spheres and Destiny, and was blocked from sharing or performing it as part of a 2015 injunction. So, Bungie said all material, which includes not just Music of the Spheres in their final states, but all versions, components, and variations of the tracks. That is all material involved in any way in the creation of Music of the Spheres and Destiny. So in 2019, O'Donnell started uploading basically they call it musical sketches, early versions of pieces that would end up being on Music of the Spheres. He started uploading those to his YouTube channel and Bandcamp. Of course, on Bandcamp, you can pay someone for, their work. So Bungie took a big issue with this, and they basically gave him a contempt of court. They took him to court over contempt of, what he was asked to do. So Mr. O'Donnell's very possession of such materials proves he did not comply with the order to return all material to Bungie. Bungie also noted O'Donnell posted tracks and an album. Yeah, so when he posted it to Bandcamp. So Bungie argued all this activity amounted to a contempt of court and a violation of the 2015 injunction. The court agreed, and on the 12th of July, blah, 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 where they ruled in Bungie's favor. So a representative of Bungie said that the company is unable to comment on ongoing litigation, but pointed to the court's ruling above. So the court has now imposed upon O'Donnell a number of sanctions, including a third-party forensic examination of his electronic devices in order to delete any assets relating to Destiny or Music of the Spheres. So when I first read this, there's a little bit more, but when I first read this, I was just kind of sad. It felt like, oh, Bungie, did they just like, are they the ones being dicks in this situation? Because that's what you always assume. You always assume that like the artist is the one who's like not, they're in the right in this kind of a situation. So then I did a little digging. So apparently, Marty O'Donnell, we don't know exactly why he was fired. But I found this post from earlier this year from the Destiny subreddit, where a now deleted account, which was Marty O'Donnell's, basically posted a link to Music of the Spheres, the Bandcamp. And let's see. There's a lot of comments on this, but there's one comment in particular that was linked, which was from a moderator who wrote this little extra. There's a lot of extra details, but I think just from the context of what he says, you can glean a lot, and he links a bunch of stuff to back up what he's talking about. So full context for people who are confused. Marty set up a Bandcamp account and wanted to shill it here. His post got removed for not being Destiny relevant, and he's now arguing with the mods and trying to organize a Twitter mob to, quote, wage war on this subreddit. So if you check that tweet, he literally says, I'm thinking of like waging a war on r/Destiny. Or Destiny the game. Like, he literally says that. Let me cut the crap. Marty does not care about Destiny or this community. He only uses Reddit for free advertisement. Always has, always will. He posted the same Bandcamp ad to r/Halo an hour ago, where he also shit-talked this subreddit for rejecting him. Actually, twice. Oh. Yep, he really did do it twice. He tried again to post here a few months ago, and it got removed for being clickbaity. Again 2 years ago, removed for being unrelated to Destiny. And lest we forget his AMA, where he spammed a link to his Echoes of the First Dreamer Kickstarter page literally dozens of times. It was in almost every reply from him. Marty, you're a talented guy, but if you want to advertise on Reddit, buy a Reddit ad, or hire a PR guy, or something. Stop treating your fans like this. It's cheap, petty, and blatantly obvious. You are here to service your own interests, not anyone else's. You are not above the rules put in place by the mods who keep our community safe and civil. Acting like you are is pure ego. You call our moderators rude, but you straight up told them, fuck you, albeit in a playfully censored way, freak you, and called them idiots. Then had your comments removed for being uncivil. This is the Halo guy. This is the music guy. Oh. And are now trying to shame them by posting unredacted screenshots of their Reddit names onto your Twitter with zero context. How do you think this makes you look? Are these tweets still here? They are literally still here. Wow, okay. The mods of this subreddit have put years of work into keeping this community together. And as someone who does not who does content moderation for a living, it's not an enviable job. Whereas you've done what for Destiny or this community in the past 6 years exactly, besides the aforementioned using us for free marketing stuff. And you want to act like you're better than them because you're more of a celebrity? Your own words, and this was crazy. Dude, I didn't know about your precious Reddit rules. I figured people would know who I am. It's rare that you see an honest to God, don't you know who I am these days? But this is entirely that. Rules are rules, celebrities don't get special treatment. This is really unfortunate because I always thought he seemed cool because he made music that was good. And it turns out he was, I don't know, kind of annoying. And when you think about it, you reflect on this now this lawsuit that he's got, his contempt of court, and you're like, so he was fired. It's like, what did he do to get fired? Huh? Like, what do you do? Like, he's been with them for a while. What did he do to get fired? And then to then just kind of like blatantly not follow what they asked of him with giving over the materials that he composed and then posting them and continuing to post them, trying to make money off of it. I don't know, it kind of reeks of like entitlement. He is also currently working at a new studio, Highwire Games, which you may know because they're currently working on the resurrection of 6 Days in Fallujah. Yikes. 6 Days in Fallujah, if you guys don't remember that, back in like 2014 or something, there was a game that was announced that was supposed to be made, the next 2 years or so, it was supposed to release, or something like that. It was announced. It was called 6 Days in Fallujah, and it was about the Battle of Fallujah during the Iraq War. And it was considered to be in very poor taste, especially because it was announced like practically months after the actual battle. And it was very controversial and eventually just got shelved, I should say. Well, it has now been resurrected, and I guess it's still happening? Oh yeah, it is being developed by ex-Bungie veterans. That's odd. Sorry, 2009. Jeez. Man, that was a while ago. Oh, and it wasn't. It was, okay, it was a few years. It was about 5 years. It was about, what's 9 minus 4? 9 minus 4 is 5. Cool. So the second Battle of Fallujah was in 2004, and the game was announced, I guess, in around 2009, around that time. Yeah. I guess it's just a case of, going back to Marty O'Donell, I guess it's just a case of never meet your heroes, because they might just be kind of dicks. It's unfortunate. It's not unfortunate. Well, maybe for some people. The NVIDIA GeForce. So if you look up NVIDIA GeForce. So the NVIDIA GeForce, let's see, exactly, what exactly was this? Where do I have the tab open? Here it is. So it looks like, I'm not entirely sure how this was ascertained. Someone did some data mining on the GeForce, which is a NVIDIA's line of graphics cards. There are I guess there's some kind of thing in it where they basically catalog games for the software. It might have to do with drivers. I'm going to be honest. I don't know that much about this. However, there were the names of a bunch of games that were registered but did not have a Steam app ID specified. That someone data mined from. It looks like the GeForce website. So this is very long. You can find the entire thing on GitHub. But there's a couple that I wanted to look through, namely. So there's a couple, like, basically a bunch of leaks happened because of this. This is the big leak. This is actually a pretty huge leak. One thing I thought was a little weird, something called first thing that caught my eye. Something called OT Pokemon MMORPG. I was like, what is Pokemon MMORPG? What is this? Is Nintendo making a Pokemon MMO? That would be kind of neat. No. It's apparently like a fan-made project. Fan-made Pokemon MMO. That's weird. I don't know why it's here. Might have some relation to the GeForce, whatever. Another thing. Let's see. I'm doing a lot of control Fing here. Where was it? Huh? Did I miss it? I wrote down... I went through this and I wrote down a bunch of stuff. Huh? Did I just make that up? Why did I write down that there was a Warcraft 2 remastered? Why did I write that down? That's so weird. It doesn't seem to be on here. Huh. Okay. Yeah, so there's this is kind of a minor thing. They list Warcraft 3 Reforged, and they also separately list Warcraft 3 Remastered. I don't know if there is any kind of significance to that, but I found it a little interesting. I don't know why I put Warcraft 2 Remastered. Or did I just miss... I guess it was just... I made a typo. And because I'm legally obligated to talk about fighting games, some pretty obvious ones, Tekken 8, Street Fighter 6, which we already knew about because of the Capcom ransomware from a while ago. Mortal Kombat 12 and Injustice 3 are both listed, which is a little strange because generally NetherRealm only does one at a time. They kind of switch off. They haven't ever like double dipped on games before. And it's weird because there's also rumors about maybe they aren't even going to... They put out a Mortal Kombat game, they support it for 2 years, and then they put out an Injustice game. That's been their pattern. But there's rumors that they might not do that this time, now that Mortal Kombat 11 is basically wrapped up. And lots of rumors about what they might potentially be going into. Injustice 3 is the obvious one because it follows the trend, but might also be something related to Marvel. Might be another Mortal Kombat game because those generally actually tend to sell better than Injustice. Which seems surprising, but yeah, the MK does sell better than Injustice. Tekken 8 was just kind of a given. Frick, I mean, Tekken 7's been out since like 20. When did the original arcade game come out? 2015. So it's been like a good 7-ish years, right? 5, 10. Wait, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 7 years. Bear with me, I'm slow. It's been a good 7 years since Tekken 7 came out. It's got 50 freaking characters. And maybe they'll have one more character, but it looks like they're kind of wrapping up 2 for now. So it's, it's to be expected, obviously. And also Street Fighter V was, I mean, they just literally came out and said that the 5th season of DLC was basically an emergency plan because they were supposed to be working on Street Fighter 6 and COVID messed up their development pipeline, which is perfectly fine because Season 5 of SF5 has actually been great. It's been wonderful. The game is really good now. Mega Man Match. Jumping into a little bit of there is a Capcom. There's a Capcom section here. Most of them are pretty, nothing that isn't already out or anything like that or known about. But Mega Man Match reappears, which I am also legally obligated to talk about. And I don't believe this was in the leak or the ransomware attack. Resident Evil 4 Remake. Yep, it is happening. It's listed right here. I mean, it just makes sense. It makes sense as all the previous remakes have done great, and Resi 4 is like, I want to say like the most popular one. It was definitely like growing up in like the 2000s and 2010s. It was definitely Resi 4 was the most iconic to me as someone who has never and still has not ever played a Resident Evil game. 4 was like, I don't know, it was the one of Resident Evil. Despite, obviously the other games are very much beloved, those first 4. So it just makes perfect sense. Leon's super popular. Leon's he's just one of the Resident Evil guys. He is like, if you wanted like a mascot for the series, it would be like him, Jill, or like Chris. Yeah, so that's cool. That's nice to get just a confirmation on. Everyone kind of expected it. Crisis 4? Crisis 4 is apparently happening. It's listed here. From Crytek. Yeah. I don't know if there's nothing else to say besides the fact that it's there. It is apparently a thing. Crisis 4. Cool. I can't wait for the memes about upgrading your PC to be able to play it come in. Isn't it funny? It's so funny that like I could probably run Crisis no problem on my like mid-tier PC. And that was like the GPU creeper of the day, the power creeper. Bunch of stuff that was fucking Gears. So yeah, I have to keep double checking to make sure that, because there's some series that I'm like, okay, that's kind of neat just to know that it exists, but I'm not super familiar with to know like that already come out. I'm talking about Gears 6. Yeah, Gears of War 6. Or just Gears 6. They dropped the of war. I guess it was too wordy. It's kind of like Fast and Furious. Gears of War does kind of remind me a bit of like a video game version of Fast and Furious. They've just kind of got, I don't know, I feel like it appeals to a similar audience. Yeah, Gears 6 is a thing. Microsoft Game Studios. It's happening, supposedly. Purportedly. Confirmation from this again from Rockstar on the San Andreas and Vice City remasters. That's great. Rockstar needs to... Rockstar, they're a developer, publisher. They don't put out a game very often. But, you know, it's like when they do, it's a big deal. And I think it's good for them because they really haven't gone back and revisited their classics. And, like, if you ever look at those lists of, like, the top 10... There's those, like, videos that people make of, like, the best-selling games by every year. And, like, dude, GTA San Andreas is on the list, like... It's in the top 10 up until, like... Honestly, might still be. That game was shockingly huge. Like, you kind of forget about it. But that game was massive in terms of just sheer sales power. So, yeah, bringing it back is great. I'm always a fan of remasters, re-releases, tasteful remakes, and stuff like that. I'm always big into that. As long as we are shackled with horrible IP law. Any company, any dev and publisher that decides to make it a priority to keep their classic titles fresh and playable on modern hardware and, you know, easily accessible, I will always applaud. And I'm sure that they're going to do a good job and give it the love that it really deserves. Because, I mean, San Andreas, like, Vice City is definitely, like, it's also got a big fan base, but San Andreas is, like, that's the moneymaker. that's going to fund GTA 6, you know? Hey, Lozy, if you've been listening this far, speaking of... Bayonetta 3 is on the list. Bayo 3 from Sega Europe. Actually, there's a couple... Bayonetta 3. Yeah, only 2. So Bayonetta 3 only from Sega Europe. I don't know if that has any significance, but yeah, also on the list. Does that mean... And again... A little further down, there's stuff like... So, like, Beyond Good and Evil 2 is on the list, right? So, take all of this with a grain of salt. I do think that these are pretty strong. But, you know, don't take it with complete certainty. Things are up in the air. And, of course, something that is true, like, right now, like, yeah, they're planning Bayo 3, might not be true in like a couple months, right? Like, these things take a while. Corporations are heavy beasts and they move slowly. So, you know, it is hype though, but not as fucking hype as I got when I got to the Square Enix section. And I saw motherfucking ActRaiser Remake. Oh, let's go, baby. Oh, let's go. Let's fucking go, dude. Oh, I'm so... Okay. There's a bunch of interesting stuff from Square Enix, actually. Tactics Ogre getting a remaster. Sick. Awesome. Deserves it. ActRaiser Remake. Not just a remaster, a full remake. I hope this isn't a mobile title. If you don't know about ActRaiser, ActRaiser is one of the most underrated games It's like a classic underrated game. It's like one of those. It's like Gunstar Heroes. It's one of those almost obvious hidden gems, and it's actually so. ActRaiser was one of the first games ever released on the Super Nintendo. In ActRaiser. It was one of the first games ever released on the Super Nintendo in December 1990. ActRaiser is awesome. It is basically it's like a cross between, it's two different styles of game that are kind of like collided together. One of them is a Civilization, kind of almost SimCity-ish, sort of like indirectly building civilization, mixed with a 2D action side scroller. So the basic premise is that you are a like celestial being in this fantasy world, and the world has been overtaken by darkness and monsters. So you you have this like floating palace in the clouds, and you basically pick a spot on the earth, fly down there, and then you have a little angel who you kind of like act through, and ActRaiser. And basically your goal is to cleanse the world of evil and return humanity to flourishing across the land. So you do this by basically like guiding the angel around, protecting that you can like do like some shooty stuff on the overworld with to kill monsters, to protect humans while they build up their towns. You could interact with the populations. They can offer you gifts. I think you could do stuff like control weather. It's been a minute since I played it, but and then basically once you expand far enough, you hit the every like map that you go through has like a every section of the world that you restore or like retake, I guess would be the word for it, has like a little basically pit, like a center of evil. And when you get there, the humans you can have fight the monsters on the overworld, but the center of evil, it's kind of like the boss. And what you have to do there is you have to go in yourself, so you strike down and it turns into a 2D side-scrolling section where you like manifest as this like knight, and then you go through this action platforming level where you fight a boss at the end, and then you've cleansed that area of evil. It's really good. It's really it's one of those games. I talked a bit last time about games that I was playing. Organize my thoughts again. My head's running fast. I talked a bit last time about, I think just at the very end, I recommended the game of Mice and Sand, which just feels like a game that someone had like they had an idea of, like, I guess you would call it the fantasy, right? The fantasy of what I want to be able to do in a game. That is appealing to them. It's like, I want to have like a little sand skimming train that's like operated by these little characters, and you build stuff and you go to towns and you collect resources and stuff and you explore. And they made of Mice and Sand, and it's just a really tight little experience. ActRaiser feels like the same thing, where it's like someone had this idea of like a game. It started with the fantasy before the gameplay, I guess. It's like a game where you cleanse the world of monsters as like a celestial godly being, and build up society. And like someone just had this idea and they made it. And it's so good. I would highly recommend checking it out. Just it is tough. Like the platforming sections and the action stuff, I remember being difficult, but it was really fun when I played it a while ago. And then we got the Chrono Cross remaster. Hell yeah! Chrono Cross is getting a remaster. Freaking sick. Chrono Cross, the sequel to Chrono Trigger, which Chrono Cross released on the... Yeah, it released on the PS1, and it's less well remembered than the original, but very well regarded by the people who have played it. So the fact that it's getting a remaster, because it is a remaster, not a remake, is great. That's very cool. And again, they're just, Square Enix is just, they are pumping these out. A Final Fantasy IX remake. A Final Fantasy IX remake. Huh? What? It is a remake, not a remaster. Like, they're very particular. Like, right above here on the list is the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, or dot remaster. They say dot in Japan instead of pixel. So, yeah, the Pixel remasters of 1 through 4, 1, 3, 4. I don't know why those are the only ones listed here. Those are remasters. Final Fantasy IX is listed as a remake. So, like, is it getting the 7 treatment? Like, are they really, like, remaking the whole thing? That's kind of like, you would think that they would... 7 is a sure bet for, you know... People love Final Fantasy VII. It's the one, right? It's the game. People who don't know anything about Final Fantasy know Cloud. 9, despite being really beloved, is not as well known. Like, people don't... If you don't know Final Fantasy, then, like... is it Zidane or Zidane? You know, he doesn't really pop into your head. It's not the first one that pops into your head when you think of the series. So the decision to go with 9 for a remake is very odd. And I kind of hope that they don't take the same route that they did with 7. Because 7 had a massive... And the combat system is completely different. It switched from the active time battle to just like action combat with like that pause turn feature system. 9, I would be kind of disappointed if they did the same thing, and the reason for that is because Final Fantasy IX was considered... Final Fantasy kind of like started out one way, right? It started out with like, you think of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then as it went on, when you get to like 7 and 8, you could say starting with 6, but stylistically it started to shift, and it started incorporating more sci-fi elements and all that. And there's always sci-fi in Final Fantasy, don't get me wrong. But it became more of like... It's really obvious with like... 6 has a very like mechanical theme to it, and that's because it's trying to sell the idea of like organic versus... the kind of motif of like organic and nature versus inorganic, and the contrast it's making with like the empire to the rest of the world. It definitely has a much more... I think of 6 and I think of like more like slightly grittier, more steampunkish, like nature and mechanical pieces kind of like forcibly fusing together, and like big networks of pipes and metal mazes and all that stuff. And then with 7, it goes way in the extreme even further, where 7 is what you would call like a diesel punk, where it's just dirty and dingy and polluted and gray. And 8 kind of kept that up. 8 is a lot more like... 8 also has that kind of feel to it. There's a lot more like contemporary feeling things in 8. And so 9 was very intentionally created to be kind of the last hurrah of the classic Final Fantasy feel, right? It's just a straight fantasy setting with a little bit of sci-fi steampunk stuff mixed in to kind of give it that classic Final Fantasy flavor. It goes back to, I mean, the logo for 9 is the crystal, which is originates in Final Fantasy 1. It's a classic motif of the series, and I'm pretty sure the tagline was like "The Crystal Returns" or something like that. So it was like 9 was a love letter to the classic style of Final Fantasy, the classic feeling, and it was supposed to go out on a high note, right? It's like, we're gonna take this, we're gonna leave on just a nice, beautiful little love letter to the older games, and then we're gonna move on. And then obviously you have 10, which is way different. So if they do a remake of 9, I would much prefer that they kept... It's more important to the identity of that game. Like, you can change the combat system in 7, and it's mostly fine. Like, some people... I do really wish that the ATB system came back, because I really enjoy it personally, as compared to just, like, straight turn-based combat. But, if you were to do 9, I think you really need to preserve all of that stuff. I think you need to preserve the turn-based combat, and it would even be nice to keep like the fixed camera angles and all that. I think that stuff would be... It's really a part of that game's identity. From, they'll almost definitely keep the aesthetics, but the gameplay identity is also important, right? That's my only hope. That's my only wish. There's also a remaster of Final Fantasy Tactics. Hell yeah. That's sick. That is sweet. I have played Tactics Advance. I have played just a little bit of the original game. Tactics Advance, I loved. I thought that was a great game. I had a ton of fun with that. Ton of people are going to be very excited for that. Tactics definitely has a really hardcore fan base, and tactical games besides like XCOM aren't really in... And XCOM and, FF Tactics are kind of different. It looks like, with the Tactics remaster and the Tactics Ogre remaster, it might be a slight resurgence in the strategy RPGs, which could be cool. I think it's a very cool genre that has sort of fallen to the wayside in the it's not much of a AAA type of genre, but at least in the AA space it has, except for stuff like XCOM, which is kind of different, right? XCOM is... what would I call XCOM? I would say it's maybe a little closer to... It's not as much of an RPG. It's more of a strategy game. A little more RTS, sort of. Kingdom Hearts 4 is on this list, right? I'm not making that up, am I? Kingdom Hearts. Yes, Kingdom Hearts 4. Okay. Whew. I was like, I didn't just have another thing where I made that up. Was there a... yeah, so wait, Legend of... Did I miss that? Legend of Mana. Legend of Mana. Oh man, I can't spell today. I have to double check. Legend of Mana remaster? Okay, yeah. All right. So it's already okay. So I didn't just miss that. Okay, yeah. So that's already been a thing. Kingdom Hearts 4. Yeah, I mean they said that Kingdom Hearts was going to pretty sure they said it was going to continue, that it was just the end of the Xehanort storyline, and I guess it's gonna be. I hope they learn their lesson and they're just gonna do a smaller, contained. Maybe not. Contained isn't the right word, but not as freaking crazy. Like, please just draft a story, like an outline from the beginning, please, so that you don't have 20 games that add so much bloat and convolution to the story that it literally becomes a meme how complicated it is. Please include more Final Fantasy characters than just the ones that Nomura designed. That was Kingdom Hearts Unchained X. What is this? Oh, is that the English name for that mobile game? Union X or Union Cross? Previously known as Kingdom Hearts Unchained. Oh, it's pronounced Chi. God damn it. Yeah, so... is that it? Yeah, so that is all of the things that were real leaks that I cared about. I mean, there's other stuff, probably. There's also just a ton of random... Let's see. Oh boy, are you ready for... Zobox? From Zobox Studio? What is that? What is Chrono Triggered? What the fuck is Chrono Triggered? No, not Chrono Trigger. Chrono Triggered. There's some kind of game called Chrono Triggered here? What is that? What is that supposed to be? From Zaremba. I can't find anything. No results. Huh. Weird. What is Zaremba? Who is Zaremba? Zaremba LLC? Some kind of real estate organization. What the fuck? What the hell? Why are they involved in something called Chrono Trigger? Okay. Let's see. Let's move on. I'm gonna take a drink. Okay, RetroArch is on Steam. That's super cool. If you are not familiar with RetroArch, it is basically a launcher or an all-in-one like front end for a bunch of emulators. It is useful. I've used it in the past for like 3DO games, which are a real pain in the butt to emulate. It is now on Steam, and the funny thing about copyright law is that they can sell it for free. It's free on Steam. I mean, you could always download it, but what this is really cool for is that, you know, obviously, like, I mean, I already have it installed just as a program on my computer. So it's an open source and cross-platform front-end framework for emulators, game engines, video games, media players, and other applications. It isn't the easiest thing in the world to use, but that's not any real fault of their own. It's kind of just that emulators are, okay, they can be finicky, and especially when you've got a bunch of them collected under one roof. What this is actually great for is, and what I think is the important thing about it, is this would be a minor thing, whatever, except for the imminent existence of the Steam Deck. One of the things that the Steam Deck, I don't know, I really can't make any kind of call on how the Steam Deck is going to do. I think it has a potential market of people who I don't know. I don't really know who the market is exactly. Maybe it'll find success. I'm assuming that it'll probably be like a niche thing that like a couple people will have. Like you'll see someone, you'll go to like an event and you'll see a guy who's like, oh, he's got a Steam Deck. Like you'll see it every once in a while, and it's gonna be for people who kind of just want to take they want like a portable gaming experience, but they don't want to, they don't want to. They're PC gamers. That might be. It's basically like a Switch for PC gamers. And this is great because you have now opened up the entire world of emulators to Steam Deck, which is going to massively increase its, I don't know, just its potential use, its potential for playing stuff. I am always pro emulation. I'm going to make that very clear. I love when stuff like this happens. I think it's really cool that people are going to be able to keep I've never used a phone emulator, like an emulator on my phone, but I don't really like want to. It seems a little like unwieldy. I don't know. The idea of like having like a little Steam Deck. I'm saying this as someone who like never leaves the house. I leave the house like once, maybe twice a week. If I'm not like going out to just take a walk around the neighborhood, which I do about every day. So don't freak out. I just think it's cool. I just think it's neat. Like I shouldn't have to justify. I shouldn't have to justify it, and I'm not gonna. Definitely check it out though if you're getting a Steam Deck, because it could be cool. You'll like it if you like retro games. And it's also just really nice that they got it released on Steam in the first place. The only downsides is that like, so emulators are called cores on this. So when you have just the standalone program, you can update the core yourself. And they have a couple. So they have a couple emulators that are technically DLC, which is how they legally skirt around any, they skirt around any legal problems that way. And then you can update them. Did I make it clear that the DLC was for the Steam version? Like, of course, if you have the like desktop version of RetroArch, then you can just download them straight up. the Steam version has the limitation of not there's right through this one negative review. So since most online components such as updating cores, database assets, and most importantly the online core download option is not available on the Steam version, you don't have the option to do these things manually. The 10 cores that are available as DLC are the worst selections that they could have made, especially for the PlayStation, since the PCSX Rearmed does not work for most games, unlike the much better PlayStation Core alternative such as Beetle. Or you misspelled it, Beetle. What a goof. Can you leave comments? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you can just download. You could just. Here's the thing. You can just download it anyway if you have the Steam Deck. You can just download it anyway. It's not a big problem. Let's see. I'm closing in on 1.5 hours. I want to talk a bit about Quake 2. So, I got Quake 2 on a sale for like $1, like a couple weeks ago. Actually, when the Quake remaster came out? I don't remember. I got it a few weeks ago. And I just got around to playing it. First of all, playing it was tricky. It's one of those, yeah, you're going to need a source port for this one. Do not play it through Steam. I tried to open it through Steam and just to check if it was playable, and it messed up the aspect ratio on my computer, and I had to go through pains to fix it again. So then I poked around for a good source port of Quake 2. I settled on Yamagi Quake, which is the most popular one, and had to go through some literal headaches to get it to work properly. This is not the fault of Yamagi Quake. They're developers. I don't know if it's multiple people. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. At one point, I was staring at 3 different file explorer windows, which all had the same names but were in different directories, and also a notepad file with instructions on what to do, and I had an actual headache trying to put the things into the right folders. And then there's an entirely different thing. You got to go get the music for some... Well, actually, there is a reason for it. So basically, the music for Quake 2 and Quake 1 has the same problem. The music was technically, basically burned directly onto the disc, which meant that when you slid it into your computer, it would play the music directly off of the disc, the physical disc. So there is some compatibility problems because the mechanism that made that work literally just does not work on the Steam version or any digital download version of it, because it's not a physical CD. So what you gotta do is you gotta go download OGG file format rips of the soundtrack that have the proper names for what songs they're supposed to be, what tracks they're supposed to be. Then you got to make a new folder in one of the other folders on your Yamagi Quake folder. You got to call it music, and then you got to put the sound files in there, and then everything works. And then other than that, the game runs pretty well. So I played Quake 2. I beat it tonight. And I have some kind of mixed thoughts on it. It is very... well, first of all, the soundtrack is amazing. The soundtrack is really good. Quite a departure from the first Quake's soundtrack. The first one was done by Trent Reznor. And he kind of said something interesting when he was asked about it, because I read an interview with him where he basically said that contrary to most video game soundtracks, the Quake 1 soundtrack isn't really one that you can just sort of listen to on its own. It really is meant to be a companion piece to the game, and Reznor actually said that he composed it like that very intentionally because he does not consider himself like a soundtrack composer. He's just, he's Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, right? And so if they were to just make basically a Nine Inch Nails album and paste it into a video game, well, probably be pretty cool, but for him, like, artistically, he didn't want to do that because he felt like it would die. If he was going to do it, he would just do a standalone album. If you do an album that is also the soundtrack for something, he thought that it kind of took too much attention away from the music. So instead, he created the soundtrack to Quake, starting from the premise that it was going to be a companion piece to the game, and that it wasn't really supposed to be listened to as a standalone album, unless you're like a serial killer, I guess, because it's very creepy. So the second game's soundtrack, they couldn't get Trent Reznor in, not because of any badness or anything. I think it was literally just he wasn't available. Second game's soundtrack was done by Sonic Mayhem. That's what they are called. Or was it one guy who went by Sonic Mayhem? I don't remember. Anyway, done by Sonic Mayhem, and it's just really good, really solid, like industrial metal, basically. Very, very like heavy, dark sound. It's good workout music, I would assume. I don't work out. But if I did, I might listen to the Quake 2 soundtrack. It's probably my favorite part of the game. Quake 2 is a very okay game. It's not bad, not by any means. It feels very, I would describe it as workmanlike, in that it sort of feels like they're just kind of going through the motions, making another shooter game. You're gonna have these guns, and there's gonna be some monsters, and it wasn't even supposed to be Quake 2. It was originally just a standalone game that was supposed to be called like more like sci-fi influenced game than Quake was. Quake was more Lovecraftian horror flavored, and Quake 2 was going to be a totally different game called War with an O. Then there was like a copyright conflict because something already had that name, so they just said, well, let's just call it Quake 2. And that's just kind of how the whole game sort of feels. It's very, I don't know what to say other than that it's very okay. It's somewhat slower feeling than the previous games, the previous id games, which is weird. I think the base movement speed felt slower. Once you get to like, bunny hopping and all that, it you could go, decently fast, but the base movement speed felt slower. There's like a weapon, there's like a time, there's like an animation for swapping weapons that takes like a full second and a half. So it really slows down like the rate of swapping through your arsenal. You can't really just like scroll through it. You have to like hit the numbers, which just kind of made the whole process a little slower. The weapons themselves are, I feel like technically I like them better than Quake 1's. One of my biggest gripes with Quake 1 was always that the arsenal felt a little bloated. It's got, mainly due to you have the shotgun and the nail gun, and then you have the super shotgun and the super nail gun. And once you get the super variants, you basically have no reason to ever use the regular ones ever again, because they're just straight up better versions, with no real downsides besides faster ammo consumption, but it's really not that big of a deal. And it just sort of created this sort of bloat where it's just a little like not super graceful, right? In a way that Doom 2 was very graceful with its weapons, where every single one, there's no real redundancy besides a little bit the shotgun and super shotgun. But even then, the regular shotgun has its uses as like it's a little better at range. It has a more focused, like a tighter spread. It does have its uses, even though it is still niche. But in general, the whole weapon selection, besides I guess the pistol, is really good in Doom 2. It's I would hazard to say perfect. And in a way, you can think about it like, I was just about to say, like, oh, the fist isn't that useful unless you have like the berserk power up. But you also get this chainsaw, which is a power up to the fist, basically. It's an upgrade to the fist. And the nice thing about the way the Doom engine worked is that you could have multiple weapons on one slot. So the shotgun and super shotgun were on the same slot, the fist and the chainsaw were on the same slot, and you just hit the button twice to switch between them. It's great. Bada bing, bada boom. In Quake, there's no... they don't do that for some reason. And it just sort of leads to this... it's such a minor thing, but it does kind of like affect... it's just sort of this little nitpick that you have to deal with the entire game, that you have to scroll shotgun, super shotgun. The only ones you want to use are super shotgun and the super nail gun. But you have to scroll... okay, I gotta scroll through the regular variants first. But it's not like the... it's not like... let's see, what was it? Shotguns on 2, super shotguns on 3, nail guns on 4, super nail guns on 5. So you gotta scroll twice. So you gotta like scroll through 2 weapons. It's just a little... it's like not a big deal. It's just a very tiny annoyance that I have with the way that it's set up. I'm definitely nitpicking here. I think in general, though, that it could have used a little work in general. Quake 2, I think, does a lot better with making the weapons feel unique from each other and not having quite as much overlap. Although there's some really good additions. I really like the railgun, which is the kind of the most significant one. Railgun is basically it's a sniper without a scope, and it's really fun. It's really fun to use, just like a kind of a point-blank shot weapon, like a high-impact weapon. It feels good, and it's a nice addition to the arsenal. You've also got... So there's like this weird thing with a lot of the weapons in Quake 2 where they're a little... again, they're like a little slow. There's like these sort of weirdnesses with them. There's a machine gun. So what are the weapons in Quake 2? You got the regular shotgun, the super shotgun, let's see, pistol, shotgun, super shotgun, machine gun, chain gun, what is it called? The hyper... there's the grenade launcher, the rocket launcher, the hyper blaster, I think, which is like basically this version of the plasma rifle. And then you have the railgun and BFG 10,000, which is just the BFG 9,000 from Doom, but slightly upgraded. So there's some like pretty clear, like, okay, the shotgun is the basic version of the super shotgun. The super shotgun's the upgrade. The SS is the upgrade. The super shotty. The machine gun is upgraded to the chain gun. But there's kind of like, I don't know, there's one thing that I found weird is like the machine gun has like this weird recoil. Like you shoot it and it's got a recoil. Your view starts like bobbing upwards, and it's just kind of like, why would you do this to me? Why did you do that? Why do you have to make it like that? It's just kind of annoying. I don't know. And then the chain gun, they are distinct. Okay, they are. It's not like a straight upgrade. I can think of situations where you would want to use the machine gun over the chain gun, and that is because the chain gun in Quake 2 fires approximately 1 billion bullets per second. Holy moly! You can carry about 300 bullets at a time, and the chain gun, you can empty the entire thing in like 5 seconds. It is insane. So it takes like about a half second to fully spin up. It starts firing basically immediately. It takes about a half second to spin up entirely to full speed. And then once you let go of the button, it like takes another like 2 seconds to come to a complete stop. And you can't swap weapons. So it keeps firing for that entire duration until it comes to a total halt. And you also can't switch weapons. So if you start firing the chain gun and then you realize, oh, I need to switch to something else, you are just kind of locked. You're just kind of trapped for like 2 seconds in the heat of combat until it can come to a halt. And there's like, did I mention? Yeah, there's like a weapon swap animation. So there's just like these little gaps. And oh, the hyper blaster. Is that what it's called? I can't remember. It's the something blaster. It's just like that. It also has this weird thing where once you let go of the button, it takes like 2 seconds to whir down and go back to neutral, and then you can start firing it again. And it's just like a weird, why is it, the only thing I can think of was that the plasma rifle in Doom also had an animation for when you stopped firing. Like it had to like cool off for a second. And that was kind of understandable because it's a very powerful, fast-firing weapon. It's like a really high DPS weapon. So you get like a slight like half-second penalty for... you can't just like quick spray like you can with the chain gun. But it's much longer in Quake 2. And it's just, I don't know, it's just like a little weird. The whole game, weapons felt like they fired slower? I don't know, maybe it's just me. The game in general felt extremely easy. I played it on hard. I didn't play it on nightmare, which maybe that's on me. Maybe that's on me, because this is not my first rodeo. I've played quite a few of these games. And I've cut my teeth on some pretty difficult retro shooters. But when I played Quake on hard, it gave me like a fair challenge, even if at some points that challenge was more annoying than than challenging. The spawns. But actually, yeah, that's another good topic, is that Quake 2, I think one of the reasons it felt easier was that like there weren't any like really mean enemies. Like Quake had some mean enemies. The Voles, those are those guys, they look like bowling pins with spider legs, and they shoot these homing like purple spiky balls at you. And like when I say homing, I mean like these things home. Like they turn on a dime. You have to make some tight corners in order to detonate them on a wall. And like those things are really difficult to deal with. You've also got the spawns. I hate the spawns. The spawns are the little blobs that jump around. They're little slimes, and then when they get close to you, they explode. And when you kill them, they also explode. Do they explode when they get close to you, or do they just like thwap thwap? Do they just smack you? I can't remember exactly. But they do explode when you kill them, which makes them really obnoxious and dangerous. And there was one enemy that I felt was legitimately very difficult to deal with in Quake 2. And that was, I think they're called lickers? I don't know. They're like little weird, like, I mean, all the enemies in the game, it has a very neat approach, like art style, I guess, in terms of the enemies, because they're like these aliens. I think they're called Strog or Strogue. The pronunciation flip-flops throughout the game. And they're like these weird, like half organic, half metal kind of monstrosities, very like body horror. And there's these enemies that they're basically like hounds. They're dogs that are fleshy but like robotic, and they have these tongues that like shoot out and stick into you, and they just sap health from you every second, and they are legitimately difficult to deal with. And then for some reason they just stop appearing throughout the game. It just kind of felt like you were just sort of going here to there, here to here. The game has a very like, they switched up. It feels like they tried, you know? They had some good ideas and they executed them fine. And one of those ideas is like a unique structure where instead of just being a level-to-level affair, it was... Quake 2 has these basically 8 units, and each unit is divided into about 3 different levels, which are all kind of like, you know, different levels of sprawling and maziness. And you can go, they all connect to each other, so you can go from one to the other, and you usually, like, you have to get an item from one to go put it in somewhere else at a different level, like a different area, and then that'll open up a thing for you to do there, and that'll let you progress. And it's very, like, it's fine. I feel like System Shock did it better. It's just, when was System Shock was, what was System Shock 1? I'll go to bat for System Shock 1 any day of the week. 1994. Yeah, it was like, I just couldn't help but think, like, I feel like System Shock did this in a better, more interesting way. A lot of the game ends up feeling kind of samey, with you're just going through metal corridors, and oh, there's an outdoor section, more corridors, and Techbase, aliens, corridors, and it's just it all kind of blends together and blurs together. There is some, like, there's some decent attempts at storytelling with, like, some interesting environmental stuff, like a lot more flavor to the world. For instance, there's a bit where you go into like the Strogue detention center, and they've got like human prisoners there. There's like the research lab, and they're like cutting them up, and it's kind of like disturbing and weird and gross, and there's like humans who are like tied up, and they're like, "Ugh," and they're like moaning and stuff, and it's a little creepy, it's a little weird. There's like, you gotta go unlock a door by like getting the head of like a Strogue like commander, and you gotta like put his head into like, it's like that bit from Doom 2016 where he's you gotta take the one person's eye who has the clearance through like the eye scanner, and you literally pick up their head from their body, and then you bring it over to the eye scanner. You gotta do that, and there's like attempts, you know, and there's like missions. You always have like a mission. There's like a unit mission and then like individual missions that are more like sequential that you go through as you sort of play. And the missions just kind of like, they just kind of complete as you go through. Sometimes you got to check what you need to do just to remind yourself. I got a little lost a few times, but it was mostly okay. And you know, just like you do, it was the mission stuff, that whole structure, it felt a little pointless. It felt like, I think because of like the way that the levels were designed, they were designed like a lot of other id games where Doom, I think the term that they coined was abstract level design, which is basically, we don't have to like explain like why any of this environment looks this way or it's set up like this. It's just there to be an interesting video game level. Like, that's it. We don't have to explain it. It's abstract. And for the most part, the games, the levels in Quake 2 are designed the same way, but they basically just attach, you could like transplant a level from Quake 2 into Quake 1, for instance, and you would be doing basically the same things, the same objectives, getting items, unlocking doors, defeating certain enemies and stuff like that. But the difference is that just all they've done in Quake 2 is basically sprinkle a little bit of like context for why you're doing any of that. Whereas in Quake or Doom or Wolfenstein, it's just because that's the end of, you get how to get to the end of the level. It's just what you do. And it's just kind of like, I never really felt challenged. My health was always like nearly maxed out. There was never really a point where I said, okay, like I died and I lost a bunch of progress and I said, okay, I'm gonna take a break. That never really happened. Like, it happened in very minor ways, and then once I like reloaded my save, I was like, oh, I just caught up really fast to where I was. It's just a very like okay experience. You just sort of play through it and you work through it, and then it's done. And you finish it and you're like, alright, that was fine. It had the difficulty curve of like it felt like playing a Kirby game. Which might sound weird and a little crazy, but like Kirby is a series that's made, Sakurai is like very upfront with the fact that like the Kirby games are made so that anyone can enjoy them. Like anyone can play a Kirby game and win. And they're just kind of meant to be sort of unchallenging, a little bit of challenge, but like not crazy, not like Mario, I guess. Mario is like, there's a difficulty to Mario. There's a big challenge. Kirby's like, yeah, there's some challenge, but the game for the most part is just kind of like a pleasant little romp that you just enjoy yourself through. And that's perfectly fine. But you never really feel like, oh, this part's kicking my ass. And that's kind of what Quake 2 felt like. It felt like you just, I think the best, if anyone is familiar with Civ 11, you should be. His channel's great. He did a video about Quake 2, and he described it as, he does like all like retro shooters and stuff like that. His channel's great. He's hilarious. He described Quake 2 in, I can't think of a better way to describe it than the way he did. And he said that basically the designers at id were going for like a power fantasy, like the previous games, but they kind of lost track of or lost sight of the fact that in order for the power fantasy to be effective, you need to have something to overcome to feel powerful, right? Power doesn't just... It's not so arbitrary as I just shred through everything, because at a certain point that's just boring. What really makes you, like, what a really meaningful power fantasy experience is overcoming a legitimately difficult challenge through, you know, your mastery or your skill at a game or your strategy. That's what makes people feel really good and cool, and that's what makes you actually feel awesome, is that you earned it. The real power fantasy comes from, I guess, a meritocracy of, like, earning things. Quake 2 is more like a socialist power fantasy, where it's just kind of distributed based off of your decision to play the game. Oh, that's totally going to be the title. Quake 2 is the socialist power fantasy. Quake 2 is the socialism of power fantasies. Oh, that's so good. My brain's working. It's about 3:10 in the morning. 3 a.m. I'm doing a 3 a.m. challenge, guys. I'm gonna call it a quits. Call it a quits for the day, for the night, for the morning, technically. And yeah, I will. I'll be back next week. I'll be back at the end of the week. I'll be back next week. I'll be back at the end of the week with a new video. I'll be back at the next week with a new podcast. Thank you so much for all the support that you've given the channel. We're really close to 500 subs. That would be really cool. I would really like to get 500 before November, or by November, because then it'll mean that I'll have 500 subs in my first year of making videos. I started making... I did like streaming before that, but I started actually making videos in November. Did I talk about this already? I never remember what I talk about on here. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave a comment down below asking a question. I will definitely get to it next time. Until the next time. Oh, you can really tell my brain's starting to fail. Bye.